following on the heels of our previous episode, was Peter the first pope? We had a lot of comments. A lot of comments. They were
some were great, some were good, some were awful.
Some were crazy. So that topic can just bring a lot of crazy out of people. But there were a few really good comments. We did have common objections like, Peter was never in Rome and this is why. And, when he says Babylon, he means Babylon.
Emoji. Yeah.
Yes, there are a lot of emojis. So we just wanted to respond to a few of those first, and one of those was the only reason that Rome ever had the primacy was because it was the capital of the empire,
Yeah, that's a common thing. And it's like, no, man.
I know.
It's actually the other way around.
Uh-huh.
You have to remember in the first century that the Christians hated everything the Roman Empire stood for.
Yeah.
And this is why you see in St. Peter's letter, he refers to Rome as Babylon.
Yeah. It's a pejorative.
It's a pejorative term for Rome. In the book of Revelation, it's the whore of Babylon, that sits on 7 hills, referring to Rome.
And Jerusalem is still standing when he writes that. So why in the world would he be like, this is the capital of the empire? He's a Jew. He's thinking about Jerusalem.
They don't like Rome.
No.
It's a cesspit.
No.
And so it's the other way around. And you can't point to a source in the early church that says, oh, well, Rome had a spiritual prestige because it was the capital of the empire. That's not what the early church fathers are saying.
Not one single source.
From day one, what gives Rome its prestige is St. Peter and St. Paul.
Yeah.
That they were in the city, that they died in the city, and their legacy lived on in the church.
And we already drew that out in the previous episode that, it was so significant to the church that these 2 specific apostles had died together. We talked about that. So I think that, too, lends more credence.
And even later, I say later Christians, but Christians of the 4th century, I think of Prudentius.
Oh, that's late, Dan.
I think of Prudentius, who is the first great kind of Latin Christian poet. He recasts in his poetry the founding of the city of Rome. Remember, the founding of the city of Rome is 2 twins, right? Romulus and Remus are kind of the founders, and then Romulus kills Remus. But anyway, Prudentius in his poetry is very beautiful because he casts the refounding of Rome as the founding of 2 brothers, Peter and Paul. Mm-hmm. And Peter shedding his blood on one side of the Tiber River, and Paul shedding his blood on the other side of the Tiber River, and that blood leaks into that river and flows and blesses the whole city. Mm. So even the later Christians understood deep down that what gives Rome prestige, spiritual prestige, are these 2 primary apostles.
Yeah. So that's great. So, that shows us that from the beginning, when the church is retracing its steps in Rome, it's Peter and Paul that gives it significance. There's no, and I would say, we'll get to this later, but even when you get to the point where Constantinople is becoming the capital of the new capital of the empire, there's never a time where the whole church is like, oh, well, that's the capital now, so we're going to look to Constantinople. So they still look to Rome, even when Rome was in shambles. Mm-hmm. So there was a spiritual significance to the city, and that's why Christendom looked to it.
And the bishops of Rome at the time objected to that inference that, primacy is based on where the capital is in the empire. And so did Alexandria. Mm-hmm. But the other thing here is the objective that, was Peter even ever in Rome? Right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know how anyone can claim that, because not in one document of the early church do we have a claim from any other see that Peter's bones were there.
Well, especially if you think about the other churches that Peter himself founded. We talked about Bithynia; he was active there, but
Antioch,
right? Antioch was the first time Christians were called Christians, right? Yeah. It's this Gentile dominating church and very influential in the early century. They never claimed to ever have his relics.
No, and just like the same argument I use when we talk about the Assumption of Mary, mm-hmm. It's the same argument. This was a time when relics meant everything. Where people's bones were meant everything. Yeah. And every see was making...
I think we should trace that. We should trace the development of relics, because the development of relics, it's there very early. We see it in Polycarp's martyrdom mm-hmm. in the 2nd century, where Christians are actively seeking out the relics. Ignatius of Antioch says, just burn my body, get rid of my body. Don't worry about my body. Because he knows that Christians are going to collect his body and hold it and venerate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we'll do an episode on that one. But yeah, you have this in this period. It's so important where people's relics are. and no one ever claimed to have the relics par excellence, besides, I don't know, Mary. I mean, no one claimed to ever have Mary's relics. And that's so significant.
Her bones.
Yeah.
Her bones.
And it's the same thing when we come to Peter and Paul. No one ever claimed to have Paul's bones. No one ever claimed to have Peter's bones. Only Rome did. And then not only did Rome claim it, everyone who's writing outside of Rome in another see is saying that their bones are there.
Yep.
So there's no doubt whatsoever. There's no, and I don't know of any serious, high church Protestant historian who doubts that Peter was in Rome or Paul died in Rome.
Yeah,
I really don't.
Yeah, because they would be basing it on silence. They would be basing the argument on silence.
This is usually an evangelical-ish type of argument, but it's not something that serious scholars
and it's there because the book of Acts doesn't say he ever went to Rome.
Yeah.
And so if it's not in the Bible, I don't believe it. Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of mentality. But all of history and tradition is telling us that they were there. And you start with the earliest documents outside the New Testament. So even if it's not in the New Testament, it's in the earliest documents outside the New Testament. Clement of Rome, he mentions Peter and Paul. Ignatius of Antioch in the earliest 2nd century, saying that Peter and Paul taught you Romans when he's writing his letter to Rome. And then you have the martyrdom stories of Paul and Peter, the Acts of Peter and the Acts of Paul, which are mid to the late 2nd century. And in those documents, they too are telling us that these two apostles were in Rome and died in Rome.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you, Danny Lucky Duck, you were able to see Peter's bones. Is that right?
I did see Peter's bones. Well, I saw Peter's bone.
If there's ever one line from a movie that I just identify with, it's in Gladiator when Maximus is like, Rome is the light.
and yet you've never been there.
And yet you've never been. Well, I've never been, but this idiot has. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your trip to Rome, when it was, why that was significant, but then also some of the things you saw there leading up to, and maybe we'll end on
we took a trip right after my reversion back to the Catholic faith. So we came back into the church May 20th, 2018, which also happened to be my birthday, but it was also Pentecost, so it was a big day in 2018. I received my second First Communion from our bishop here. But right after, there was only like a few weeks later, I think I was in the basement or something, and Victoria calls down to me and says, "Hey, I booked a trip to Rome." I was like, okay, good, thanks, good.
I'm just waiting for the day when my wife says that to me.
So we just, coming back into the church, we just felt we had to go.
Yeah.
We wanted to go, and it's something that I hope all Catholics eventually could do. It's like in Islam, you have the 5 pillars of Islam, right? At least once in your life, you have to take a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yeah.
If you're able, at least once in your life, take the pilgrimage to Rome. If you're going to go anywhere, if you're going to go sightseeing in Europe, and you're Catholic, you have to go to Rome.
There's one thing actually that always stuck with me when I came back. It was I attended a Byzantine Catholic.
From where?
When I came back from Protestant, I didn't go anywhere.
Oh.
I've barely been out of the country. But when I came back to Catholicism, I was at a Byzantine Catholic service, and it was the priest. He had studied in Rome when he was younger, and he said, I've been there many times, but he had gone back this recent time. And he said, in this time when I went back, there was something that just stuck in my mind. And he said that, I stood there, I looked at St. Peter's Square, and I said to myself, Rome has the keys. Rome has the keys.
It's kind of like the de facto thing you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's just apparent.
It's just apparent. It's not like you can make your arguments all day long about this, that, who should have the keys, but it's like it doesn't matter at the end of the day because Rome has them. Yeah. And that was very significant to me when he said that because that's, to be honest with you, that was one of the moments when the de facto thing came to my mind where I was like, that is theology. Like that moment when he said that, that's theology because he looked at it and he said, that's it. Rome has the keys. And he said, but me as an Eastern Catholic, I take more after Saint Andrew, that's sort of his patronage. And so he said, Andrew was happy to just have the faith. Peter has the keys, but Andrew is happy to have the faith. I love that. I love that image.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think you get this, you definitely get this in other places and other cities, especially in the former Eastern Empire. But when you're in Rome, what strikes you is the layers. It's like a layer cake. Okay, you go down 2 layers, 3 layers, you're in the 1st century. And when you are able to see that firsthand, it's like, how can this church be the wrong church? Because I see it at this level, I see it at this level, and I see it at this level.
Oh, that's a great point.
all at the same time. And that's what struck me about Rome. Just the clashing of civilization over time, building on top of each other.
Yeah.
And you can go all the way down to the 1st century if you want to.
Yeah, yeah. And all the different ownerships of Rome, as the years went on, from pagan to,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you went to Rome.
Yeah,
and...
so May, we came back into the faith. June, we booked the trip. September in 2018, we went.
But you got like a little tip, right? Before you went.
So the day, and a lot of Catholics don't know this because I didn't know this.
I wonder if we're even supposed to be like revealing this.
I know it seems like it's a secret, but
yeah.
Hey,
secrets out.
Subscribe.
Yeah. Subscribe for secrets.
So literally the day before we left, my wife and I, after Mass, our priest, Father Tom, came up to us. And I said, hey, Father Tom, we're leaving tomorrow. Can you give us a travel blessing? Sure, fine. After the blessing, he says, oh, by the way, don't forget, ask about the Scavi tour. Like, oh, all right, I'll ask about the Scavi tour. No, the Scavi tour, the tour at St. Peter's Basilica. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, that's probably underneath in the basement of the Basilica.
Yeah.
No, he said, no, the tomb of St. Peter.
Jeez.
Under the Basilica. He said, ask about it.
Who do you ask?
And he said, now, you're probably not going to get, I'll get to that. So he's like, if you didn't already book it, you're probably not going to get in. So don't have your hopes up. I'm just saying, if you're there and you have, maybe they'll let you in. Who knows? But anyway, the Scavi tour, excavation tour, you have to book this thing 6 months in advance at least. And there's people who have booked it, tried to book it 6 months in advance and haven't even gotten there. So what is this Scavi tour? Right? We get to St. Peter's Basilica, we tour the Basilica. We go into the basement of the Basilica. That's where most people can go.
Yeah.
And that's where the tombs of the
popes. Just a bunch of the tombs.
Yeah, the tombs, the grotto, right? The tombs are down there of the popes. Well, when there was excavations going on because a pope wanted to be buried near St. Peter, they stumbled upon the ancient necropolis, which means city of the dead.
Yeah.
So an ancient necropolis underneath the basement. So you have St. Peter's Basilica, okay, the main level. Then you have the basement of the Basilica.
Deeper and deeper, way down.
But there's a basement to the basement of the Basilica. And what this is the necropolis, the ancient cemetery dating back to the 1st century. And that's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's nuts.
So they found the cemetery that for all these years, centuries and centuries, tradition has told us was there.
Yeah.
Oh, we made a hole in the floor, and there it is. We see a bunch of old Roman mausoleums down. Yeah, nice. There's the mausoleums down there.
Yeah.
In this necropolis, ancient necropolis. So here's the story, really quick. We remembered that Father Tom told us to go to the Scavi tour.
Scavi.
So we're like, let's skip out of our tour group really quickly. We did take a tour group.
Because this is lame.
We like to explore on our own. So we left the tour group.
Yeah.
Left them in the dust. Went to the back of St. Peter's Basilica, to the, what do you call it, concierge? I don't know. There's a table back there.
I can literally see the tour guide like still talking to
with her flag.
To like the person
no, she
like
had her flag,
wearing like
and
the khaki cargo shorts.
We did a complete 180, left the group, and went to the back table and said, where's the Scavi tour? Like, how stupid, right?
Yeah.
Where's the Scavi tour? And she's like, do you have a reservation?
How dare you?
Yeah. How do you know about this?
Who are you?
And she said, do you have a reservation? And I said, no, I don't have a reservation. She said, well, you need a reservation for that to go there. She's like, well, I was like, well, who else maybe I could ask and they can let us in? She's like, if you want to try, you can go ask the Swiss guards.
Who's ever talked to a Swiss guard?
Yeah, I know. I thought it was like in Britain, you can't talk to them or touch them or anything. No, that's not what it's like. I went to the Swiss guards.
No way.
Victoria and I went to the Swiss guards, and I don't even know what I did. Like, hey, Swiss guard. I don't know what I did.
Hey,
like,
Swiss guard.
I don't know if I whistled to him. I don't know what I did, but I got his attention, and he kind of just walks over with a smile. They're actually really nice people.
Wow.
For all their training. And I said, hey, we don't have tickets, but where's the Scavi tour? We kind of maybe want to ask to get in. He's like, yeah, it's going to be very difficult to do that just on a whim like that. They usually don't do that at all.
Yeah.
But if you go around let's see what side this is.
Gosh.
It would be the south side of the basilica, where the portico is. Mm-hmm. Go over there. You'll see some guards and a metal detector. Go ask them.
And there's a guy. His name is Bill.
So go over there. So, okay, go to the south side of the basilica. Go to the portico. Oh, there's the metal detector.
Yeah. See, I mean, for me right now, this sounds like total sketch. Like,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know
trust
what's
this.
happening because nobody's on this side of the
It's
basilica.
like some Italian joke.
Yeah, yeah, no, or a Swiss joke. Nobody's on this
Nice.
side. Nobody's on this side of the basilica. It's literally just me and Victoria. And then the now they're not Swiss guards. Now they're security guards.
Ah,
And we're like, oh, Scavi tour. And like, okay, just go through the metal detector and go around to,
No
whatever.
way.
Like, okay, so we go in and we're like, this is really going to happen? Then we get to the gate on the side of the basilica.
and then they threw you in the Tiber.
And I said, hey, we don't have a reservation or anything, but we came all the way from America, support Americans, and we want to get into the Scavi tour. He said, you have to have tickets for this. And
Jeez,
I said,
man.
there's no way. And I think Victoria said, is there any way we can talk to them? And he said, hang on for a minute, whatever. A minute goes by. Comes back and he says, just you, pointing to Victoria. Just you can go to the office to ask them
Wow.
to come in. So she runs over there, and I'm like, this can't
Where
be
is
happening.
my wife?
Is this going to happen? What are they? Is she arrested? What's going on?
She said,
and
Scavi.
she's at the far end of now the far end of the basilica, and I'm standing back by the portico, the gates, and I'm like, what's going on back there? She's talking to people. She goes in the office, and then she comes out and she's like thumbs up, like this. I'm like, this is unbelievable.
No way.
Comes back, guard lets us in. Turns out the scholar who was taking this small group, you're only allowed 10, 15 people at a time. They were leaving at that moment.
Wow.
And he said, fine, they can come in. Because they told us it was up to the tour guide.
What a coming home treat.
Yeah.
Like to becoming Catholic
No,
again.
absolutely. And it just so happened that we were there at the second they were leaving, and he was willing to add us onto the group. And so we get to go down into the ancient Acropolis.
So what does that look like? So you're, I don't even have a context for
I know.
this.
Yeah. So again, you got to go down layers.
Yeah.
Going down layers. Modern basilica.
So once you're down in like the tomb area, where from there? Like, are you going?
So you're actually on an ancient little sidewalk,
Wow.
and your feet are touching the very ground that the first century ancient Romans were touching. Think of it as a cemetery with a little pathway and street, and there's tombs and mausoleums.
Wow.
This used to be outside.
Yeah.
This used to be above ground.
Yeah.
But now it's obviously underground, built on top of. And so you're going between these tombs and mausoleums, and he's pointing out, okay, this is a pagan one, this is a pagan one, this is a pagan one.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, he's like, this is a Christian one.
Now they start turning.
As you get closer and closer to where the high altar of the basilica is.
Wow.
Okay? So that'd be facing, the west side. Mm-hmm. Okay, the tombs are starting to change a little bit. There's 3 or 4 tombs that are Christian.
Yeah.
And you only know this because of the symbolism that's being used in the frescoes on the ceilings of these mausoleums, of these tombs. One of them has Christ as portrayed as almost like Sol Invictus, sunbeams coming from his head when he's on a chariot. Others, you see the Chi-Rho, right, etched into, graffitied into the plaque. Mm-hmm. And so you start to get a sense of we're
Things are changing.
Things are changing in this ancient cemetery that I'm walking.
Wow.
And then you continue to get closer, and he points out to you, okay, that little pillar you see right there, that's the pillar of that Gaius was talking about in the 2nd century when he said that Peter's monument is in Rome in the Vatican. That little pillar you're seeing is part of that monument.
Wow.
Okay. So then, so you're going around, and then you come to the Clementine Chapel, which is on the opposite side now of where the tomb is. And that's where Pope Francis actually says Mass every morning.
Wow.
So you get to go in there. And then you come around to the other side. There's a little room, if I can remember. I mean, there's no cameras.
Yeah, you can't take pictures or anything, probably. Yeah.
No, you're underground, and it feels like you're underground.
Jeez.
It is like catacombs. No pictures. So I'm trying to remember, and I have drawings in my journal that
I remember
I
you were
tried
showing
to
me
draw
drawings.
and etch. Maybe I'll show some on the video. But now you're in this other room. Now you're on the north side of the tomb. Maybe a room of 10 by 10.
Yeah.
And he says the little hole in the wall over there is where they found the case where the bones were being held.
Wow.
And he said, today you're in luck because the bones are displayed.
Jeez. Wow.
I don't know what everybody else in the room was thinking, but I was, and he said that, and he said, I've always found it really fascinating that the piece of bone that was on display that day was St. Peter's jawbone. We're standing. We're I don't know, a couple yards away, maybe. I was staring at right there, Victoria and I, and the rest of the group, these nominal Catholics. I don't know, bless their hearts, but they okay, and then they left.
Oh my
and
gosh.
And I look at the tour guide. The tour guide, by the way, I can't remember his name for the life of me. He was a fantastic scholar.
Mr. Scavi.
Scholar, not just like Mr. Scavi.
Dr. Scavi.
And so they leave, and I'm standing there like, I'm not going anywhere right now.
I'll stay as long as I can.
And they leave. He turns back to me and says, "You guys stay as long as you need."
Wow.
So now it's literally just me and Victoria.
Because he saw you guys respected them.
I was writing notes as he was talking. I was drawing pictures. Everything I can try and soak in.
Yeah.
And so then now it's just me and Victoria in front of
Peter's jawbone.
Wow. And think about that. This is the jawbone.
Yeah.
That was the first to proclaim, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God."
Yeah.
This is the jawbone that ate the first Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
This is the jawbone that gave the first sermons. And there it is.
Yeah. It's this is the thing, is that, it's when you're just talking about like, St. Peter, and like, or not even calling him St. Peter when you're a Protestant, like, Peter, he's not any greater than us though, right? Because we're all saints and this kind of stuff. Like, yeah. But like, no, really though. Like Peter,
Saint Peter, yeah,
the God of the universe, the one with his own voice fashioned the cosmos and the heavens and the earth, and set the sea in its place, and and by his word it was declared and it was done. That God, our God, touched this man and told him that you're the rock, and upon this rock I'll build my church.
Hence
why it happened.
Here's the church.
Despite all of the messiness and the spots and the wrinkles of the church and its history and the human side of it, there's a divine undergirding story that's happening. Yeah. And where just like Paul says, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. God is not like thwarted by human weakness or the weakness of the story of the church. He will still bring about what his word wants to accomplish. And Jesus' word, just as much as he took that bread and wine and said, "This is my body, this is my blood," he also took Peter and said, "You're the rock, man." Mm-hmm. So it's just crazy that you're looking at the bones of the man that Jesus commissioned to be the leader of the apostles, and not just the God, like really God commissioned to be the leader of the apostles.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget it. The images are in my mind. I have them drawn out as well. And, we prayed there for our families, for the church. What a great place to do it at.
That's why to not venerate those bones, like not worship them, but to not pay homage, to not pay a certain honor that is due, to not do that. All it means is that you have a very low Christology. You have a very low view of Jesus's identity. Mm-hmm. Because if you really believe that Jesus was the God of the cosmos, the creator of the heavens and the earth, then you would look at that man that Jesus touched with his own hands and commissioned to be the leader of the apostles, and you would fall down and venerate him.
Yeah, if the cloak, if his cloak had that kind of power, certainly this man, who he appointed as the leader of the apostles, would have need due honor and veneration, and that due honor and veneration has been there since forever. The Christians remembered where he was buried. That's why they built the monument there in the 2nd century. That's why they built the church on top of it in the 4th century, and then rebuilt the church on top of it in the succeeding centuries. And every century tells you that this has been here since the beginning. Yeah, it's marked out since the beginning. This is where Peter is. So when you look at it archaeologically, right? Why do we say that these are Peter's bones? Well, because of that history we just mentioned, all these layers that are there for all these centuries, telling us that these are his bones. There were those who doubted when the news came up that they found the bones. There were those who doubted because they said, well, those bones that you picked out of that were in a chest, and they didn't come from actually under where the monument was in the ground there. Yeah. Okay, fine. But they then tested those bones. They carbon dated it, and they tested the minerals that are in those bones. And the bones that were in that box, not only did they find purple silk and gold thread, which means at some point the church took the bones out
and dressed them,
and wrapped them, dressed them, and put them in a chest. Mm-hmm. The bones, all the bones in that little tomb area, in the ground, they found like animal bones, rodent bones. They found some human remains, female, male. None of them matched Peter. They were, a woman in their 40s, a man in their 50s, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
The bones that were actually in the chest, and Margarita was the excavator, the archaeologist. She found it and they tested it, and she said, "These bones, we know these were the bones in the original tomb, in the original ground, because they're grafted into these bones is the same exact 100% mineral content as is found underneath in the ground." Underneath the monument.
Yeah.
So you know that at one time,
it was really
these
there,
bones were actually in that ground. They weren't brought from somewhere else.
Right.
They were there. Then the bones were tested, carbon dated, 1st century. How old was this person? In their 60s. That's what Peter would have been.
Wow.
Was it male or female? It was male.
Male. Yeah.
Robust. Strong.
Wow.
Strong-boned man in his 60s, matching the mineral content of where that monument
Does it
is.
say like this is Peter or something like that?
Yeah. So the archaeologist, she actually, she's an expert in epigraphy, epigraphic evidence, graffiti actually. And on one of on the wall of the monument, she discerned in Greek Petroseni, which she took as meaning in Greek Peter is within.
Peter's here.
Peter's here, or Peter is within.
Wow.
In Greek. So it's early because it's written in Greek and not Latin.
That's a good point.
Okay, so it's Greek graffiti on the monument wall where Peter is supposed to be. They're telling us.
It's like
they're
how
telling
much
us he's here.
Yeah. It's like how much more evidence do you need?
What else do you need?
Why is it that you're more willing, if you're a Protestant, for instance, you're like just taking at face value that someone was buried somewhere else? Like if you could ever have archaeological evidence for something, this is it. I mean, this is it. How much more do you need? Yeah. Besides the textual evidence that supports it, with the epigraphic evidence, like you're saying, the soil evidence. I mean, the forensic evidence of the bones. It's like, how much more do you need?
The other thing I would add is it's also actually an appropriate place for Peter to be buried. Why do I say that? Because the Vatican in the 1st century was wasteland.
Yeah.
People hated this area. Was outside of the city. It was swampy. It was known to have be infested with snakes.
Oh.
So it was like swampy and not good land. And there was attempts in the 1st century to kind of make it more pretty. They built like gardens and stuff and all that stuff. And one of those attempts to make it more pretty was actually to build nice mausoleums, dating from the 1st century to the 3rd century. The other thing was that Emperor Tiberius or Claudius, built a circus there. So that elongated racetrack, basically. He built it.
Oh, so it didn't have clowns or...
No, not that kind of circus.
Oh, okay.
He built this racetrack there, okay, to kind of draw people to that area. And, and if you look, people will say, well, how could Peter be buried there? If you look to where the original circus was built, the tomb would have had to have, or the burial site would have had to have been literally right next to the circus. So a lot of people like to say, well, come on, that's not...
Yeah.
It wouldn't be right next to a place of entertainment. No, yes, it would. Romans, there's a road that ran right alongside the circus, and Romans typically buried their dead along the road outside of a city. Here we are, outside the city walls,
on a road.
Literally right next to that road is where they put Peter in the ground. Not a tomb. They put him in the ground, and they always remembered that spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can mark out that circus. So if you're looking at pictures, even if you're not there, but you're looking at pictures of St. Peter's Basilica in the square, and you see the Egyptian obelisk, that's not the original location of the obelisk. For many, many years, people thought that's where the circus was, because in Roman circuses, the obelisk was always in the center.
Yeah.
The obelisk's original position is marked out on that side where I had to get into the Scavi tour. It's on that side of the basilica, the south side of the south side of the basilica. There's a mark where the obelisk used to be. So now we know where the circus was.
Yeah.
Where the road was.
You can identify.
And now it makes sense. That's where Peter would have been buried.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that had to be a life-changing experience, obviously.
Yeah.
But
I don't know, and you never know if you'll be able to get back there, because it's not guaranteed. Even if you try and book it, it's not guaranteed. Even when you get to Rome, sometimes people have checked in. They say, no, you're not. It's not going. Like right now during COVID, it's not even open. You can't even get down there.
Yeah. And there's one thing that's for sure, is that Peter was never wearing a mask on that jawbone.
No. No, he wasn't.
No, but I think, following up from our last episode, there's all the textual evidence, there's that, there's this, but then there's just this personal experience too, sometimes that just kind of takes over, This is why Christians would go on pilgrimage for centuries to go see these sites for themselves. It's one thing to read about it. It's quite another to see it. And so you can say all day long, they're like, oh, Peter and Paul buried in Rome, and then have your your debates and stuff. But to stand there underground and stare at the jawbone itself.
Well, I don't know what else to say about it. It's internal to me. It's you can't. There's not enough superlatives to describe it and to
Yeah. So I think when people ask for evidence, there's the textual evidence, but then at the end of the day, there's just the evidence of the personal experience of there are the bones. I saw them.
I've seen them. I've seen the fishermen.
Yeah.